If you could ask for just one thing today to change the direction of your professional, financial, and family life, what would it be? Money? Luck? What if I told you there is something far more powerful, something that has crossed thousands of years and still remains the greatest manual for human survival ever written? Today, we are going to dive line by line, verse by verse, into the chapter that opens the most practical book in the entire Bible, Proverbs chapter 1. In the reflections ahead, you will discover the exact difference between being intelligent and being wise, and you will learn how to protect your mind against the greatest traps of our century. This is not just a theological study, it is a practical roadmap for your life. The book begins by clearly identifying its author, the Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel. Solomon was not only a wealthy king, he was the man who, when given the opportunity by God to ask for anything he wanted, chose wisdom to govern and to discern between good and evil. Right in verses 2 through 6, he makes the purpose of this manual clear. He writes so that we may know wisdom and instruction, so that we may understand words of insight, and so that we may receive instruction in good judgment, righteousness, justice, and equity. Notice that biblical wisdom is not an abstract intellectual concept. In ancient Hebrew, the word used for wisdom is chokmah, which literally means practical skill for living. It is knowing how to act when the rules are not completely clear. In essence, it is the art of living well and living rightly. We then arrive at verse 7, which is the true foundation of the entire book. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. If you understand this single sentence, you will have the key to understanding life. But what does fear mean? Contrary to what many people think, it does not mean terror or the fear that God is waiting to punish us at any moment. In the original biblical context, fear means deep respect and quiet reverence. It is the humble recognition that God is God and we are His creatures. It means aligning our moral compass with the Creator. The text makes a very strong contrast here. The one who rejects this instruction is called a fool. In biblical wisdom, a fool is not someone with low intelligence, but rather a proud and self-sufficient person who chooses to live as if God does not exist, or as if their own opinions were the ultimate truth. Right after this, Solomon anchors wisdom within the family environment. In verses 8 and 9, he writes with the affection of a father, "My son, hear the instruction of thy father, and forsake not the law of thy mother." He promises that these teachings will be like a graceful crown upon the head and ornaments around the neck. In ancient times, ornaments like these represented authority, beauty, and public honor. What the author is telling us is deeply profound. Listening to the experience of those who love us and came before us does not enslave us. On the contrary, it protects and enriches us. In a culture that often idolizes youth and dismisses old age, Proverbs brings us back to the family table, to the value of family heritage and respect for parents. Starting in verse 10, the tone of the chapter shifts into an urgent and dramatic warning about real life. He says, "My son, if sinners entice thee, consent thou not." Solomon then describes a dark scene of peer pressure. He portrays people inviting a young man to commit crimes, set traps for the innocent, and gain wealth quickly. Their invitation sounds tempting. "We shall find all precious substance. We shall fill our houses with spoil. Cast in thy lot among us. Let us all have one purse." If we bring this scene into our daily lives, where are these tempters today? They are in promises of easy money and effortless success, in questionable financial schemes, fraud, and the intense social pressure to compromise your personal values just to be accepted by a group. The message is always the same. Come with us. No one will notice. It's fast money, and we will all profit. Solomon's response to this invitation is immediate and absolute. Walk not thou in the way with them, refrain thy foot from their path. To illustrate the danger, he uses a brilliant metaphor about animal behavior in verse 17. Surely in vain the net is spread in the sight of any bird. What he means is that even a bird, if it sees a trap being set, instinctively avoids landing there. Yet greedy men can become more foolish than birds. They plan evil without realizing that they are digging their own grave and setting traps against their own lives. Verse 19 summarizes this warning with a crushing truth. So are the ways of everyone that is greedy of gain, which taketh away the life of the owners thereof. Easy profit, lies, and injustice always demand a price in the end, taking away a person's peace of mind, freedom, or even their very life. After this warning in the shadows, the scene changes dramatically, and we are brought into the light of day, into the middle of the public square. The text says that supreme wisdom cries out in the streets and raises her voice in the busiest places of commerce and the cities. Why is wisdom described as someone shouting in public? Because God did not hide wisdom in an inaccessible place or keep it as a secret for a select few. It is available to everyone. It reveals itself in the practical reality of life, in the results of our everyday decisions. Wisdom asks a painful question to those who pass by. How long, ye simple ones, will ye love simplicity, and the scorners delight in their scorning, and fools hate knowledge? In this question, wisdom identifies three types of people who are in danger. The simple, who are naive, without convictions, and easily influenced by every opinion. The scorners, who are cynical and mock what is right and true. And the fools, who have chosen to actively hate any kind of counsel or instruction. But wisdom does not only want to point out our mistakes. She makes an extraordinary and hope-filled invitation. Turn you at my reproof. Behold, I will pour out my spirit unto you. I will make known my words unto you. To turn means simply to change direction. The promise is that if we decide to stop, listen, and correct the course of our lives, wisdom will be poured out upon us like a pure and abundant fountain. There is always an opportunity for a new beginning, no matter how many mistakes or foolish choices may be behind us. However, the text also brings a very solemn warning. What happens if we choose to ignore this call day after day? Starting in verse 24, the tone becomes serious. Wisdom warns that because she called and people refused, because she stretched out her hand and no one paid attention, she also will not be able to help when ruin comes. The text describes that when terror comes like a storm and destruction arrives like a whirlwind, many will cry out for help, but will not find an answer. This is not an act of cruelty from wisdom, but the inevitable harvest of the laws of sowing and reaping. It is impossible to spend an entire life planting negligence and foolishness and then expect to instantly reap peace and security in the moment of crisis. As verse 31 says, "Therefore shall they eat of the fruit of their own way, and be filled with their own devices." The greatest punishment for rejecting wisdom is having to live with the consequences of one's own choices. The chapter ends by presenting a perfect and final contrast between the two possible paths. In verse 32, we read that the turning away of the simple will destroy them, and the false security of fools will ruin them. But verse 33 brings us the great promise of peace. "But whoso hearkeneth unto me shall dwell safely, and shall be quiet from fear of evil." Notice that even the prosperity of a foolish person can become their downfall, because they lack the inner structure to handle success. On the other hand, those who choose to listen to wisdom and practice the fear of the Lord find real security and peace of mind that remain firm even when the world around them is in crisis. To apply this timeless lesson in your daily life, Remember 3 simple attitudes. First, carefully evaluate who is influencing your decisions and reject unethical shortcuts. Second, cultivate reverence for God before making any important decision, asking yourself whether that choice honors eternal principles. And third, do not ignore the small warnings of life. Wisdom speaks to us through our experiences, through the counsel of those who love us, and even through our past mistakes. Listening to these signs in time is what protects us from the storm. Choose wisdom today, live with integrity, and enjoy a life that is truly secure and at peace. As we close our journey through this first chapter, I want you to take one final reflection with you. Wisdom is not a destination you arrive at, but a path you choose to walk every single day. Every decision, no matter how small it may seem, is leading you either closer to the safety of those who listen to instruction or closer to the trap laid by foolishness. The invitation of Proverbs 1 is for you to stop merely living life and begin building it on a foundation that time cannot destroy. Wisdom is crying out in the streets, at your workplace, and in the silence of your own heart. The question is not whether wisdom is speaking, but whether you are willing to listen. If this study brought clarity to your mind and peace to your day, do not keep this seed only to yourself. Share this message with someone who needs guidance right now, and so we can continue growing together. Leave a comment below. What was the greatest lesson you learned from today's study? I read every comment, and it truly brings me joy to see how these timeless principles continue transforming lives. If you are not yet subscribed, join us so you do not miss the studies from the next chapters. Thank you so much for staying with me until the end. May wisdom be your constant companion, and may the fear of the Lord guide every step you take. See you in the next video.